Welcome to episode 1 of the Pullin Up from 40 podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Shapiro.
Colin Stanley.
And we are launching a podcast centered around the game of basketball because we are two huge basketball fans. And just to give you a little background about ourselves, we actually were podcasting before your favorite podcast host. I promise you that. We were literally podcasting in 2010 and had like this funny setup where we would literally call each other, and there's this website called Blog Talk Radio where it would get recorded, and we did a lot of the same things that we want to do now. We're talking about NBA. We had guests on the show. We're still trying to figure out exactly the direction of the show, what's our niche, but we're primarily going to talk a lot of NBA basketball. We may talk some college basketball. It really is going to depend on the hosts that we can get. We have some fun hosts planned already for the show, which I'm pretty excited about. And so let's kind of introduce ourselves. Colin, why don't you go first?
Thanks, man. Colin Stanley, originally from the Boston area. As you can see, I'm wearing our currently shamed franchise t-shirt. So like I said, from the Boston area, been living, so we're recording here outside of, or really in downtown Chicago, where I've been living for, both of us have been living for him 6 years, me 5 years. Like Lucas said, we're both just really huge hoop fans. We're excited to, bring kind of our own personal commentary and our connections in the basketball world to, really just, keep building on great conversations and, talking, like Lucas said, NBA hoops, college hoops, all of that. From a basketball perspective myself, really the two of us, really our friendship started as basketball teammates. We met back in 3rd, 4th grade. Our dads were actually coaching us, our travel basketball team back in 4th grade, and has really always kind of been the center of our friendship, and has continued to do so through almost 20-ish years of friendship. And we played from 4th grade all the way through high school together. For myself, I played at the club level in college at Iona out in New Rochelle, New York. Had a great opportunity to play really competitive basketball in the tri-state area. Not at that D1 level. They weren't looking for a undersized 6'2" power forward such as myself. So played at the club level, but it was really great having the opportunity to go up against schools like St. John's, UMass Amherst, URI, really big regional schools in the Northeast, and have continued to be just a massive basketball fan throughout life. So to that extent, really just wanted to first and foremost say thank you to all of you guys who are viewing, whether it be on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Music, what have you. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Any suggestions, recommendations, feedback on our show is greatly appreciated. As Lucas mentioned, we are we're still trying to figure out how this is really going to operate long term, but at the end of the day, this is something that we're both passionate about, and we'll continue to work towards bringing you guys quality content. So I'll leave it at that and toss it over to my guy here.
Yep. So Lucas Shapiro, we're both from Milton, Massachusetts, and grew up playing basketball, love it my whole life. Really started to realize when I was playing high school basketball that I wanted to stay around the game for my entire life. And while I was playing, started getting involved in like the high school basketball scene, AAU scene, writing about it in high school on the side of also playing, and went to University of Missouri, became a student manager there, worked there for 4 years. Then after graduating from Missouri, went to DePaul University to work for their men's team as a graduate assistant. And then after 2 years there, went on to be a video coordinator for 3 years. And really just working in college basketball for 9 years was an awesome experience. I saw so many great players, got to work with players like Jordan Clarkson on the Jazz, Max Strus on the Heat, Paul Reed on the Sixers, and a handful of other pros. And just learn how the basketball industry works and how there's just a lot that your average person who doesn't get that experience doesn't know. So hopefully a lot of that will translate into how we cover basketball and talk about it on the show. Also, the past year was coaching at the high school level in the Chicago area, so I've been really lucky. I've gotten to see a lot of good ball, and just think that I want to do that as I'm not coaching anymore, but want to do stuff like this around basketball, social media, podcasting. So
and to just quickly add, so this guy, you alluded to the fact that you started this kind of like basketball journey when we were in high school, and being like front and center to his kind of development in that area. Like I was able to, by proxy of being, close with this guy, was able to see a lot of really good basketball at a young age too. I mean, there was a lot of really high level talent in the Massachusetts and New England area when we were growing up in, early, 2010 area. I remember driving out to random tournaments to go see Andre Drummond and Chris Dunn playing for, Connecticut Basketball Club.
Yeah.
Back in the day, Caleb Tarczewski, Nick Stauskas, Nerlens Noel, Wayne Selden, tons of just like high level talent that, we were both kind of introduced to as young kids. And, like we said, this has kind of just been our passion for a really long time. And, for myself, definitely been, grateful to have, a guy like Lucas to, kind of help bring me along in that space too, and, help develop my own knowledge and passion for the game. So, won't overextend it, but, just really excited to get this kicked off.
For sure. And just to add one more thing before we get into covering the Eastern Conference on this episode, Colin's was like my right-hand man. Like anytime I ever hear like any type of rumor or something going on in college basketball, I always hit this dude and be like, yo, some shit about to go down.
What the hell's going on with Ime Udoka now?
Like this is like my confidant right here.
Yeah.
And we just have had so many great basketball conversations over the years that I'm like, damn, why don't we just record them and put them on the internet and see what happens, right?
Yeah, figure it out.
So, I think why don't we just jump into the episode, because there's a lot to talk about in the Eastern Conference right now.
You already know.
So just to give you some context, we're recording this on September 24th, 2022. If anything happens, we're hoping that this gets released on Monday. But if anything happens in the meantime, just take that into account when you're listening to this episode. So one of the first things we want to talk about in the Eastern Conference was the offseason, because we feel that basketball has not been really talked about a lot this summer, right? Because it's been Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving drama, it's been Robert Sarver drama, it's been now Ime Udoka drama, and I don't feel like the league has gotten the coverage it's deserved for some of the moves or some of the basketball stuff that's happened, right? So
not as many big names getting moved around compared to other summers, I think. So it's kind of gotten lost. Just in the broader sense of like we've just been focusing on, right, like just the kind of the life around the NBA versus like actual talking about basketball. So
right
to that exact point.
Yeah, I just feel like I haven't really looked at it on paper over the last summers, like comparing free agent moves or trades to other summers, but this is the first summer where I'm feeling like there's not like this new super team that's came out and like there was major moves. Like it's been kind of pretty more subtle moves that, I feel like the NBA is very divided right now. Like there's teams, I feel like more teams than ever that feel like they can contend, but then there's also a lot of teams that are really trying to lose. So
tanking for Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, exactly. So
he went off yesterday too.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
It was like 23, 10, and 3 or something in his first league game in France this season.
Yeah,
the kid's a freak.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
We'll get to him at some point.
True.
But Colin, what do you think let's talk about our 3 best offseason moves in the Eastern Conference. I'm curious what your 3 are.
Yeah. So I think probably the biggest move across the NBA this offseason, I think, has to be Donovan Mitchell going to the Cavs. I think he immediately elevates them just from a perspective of having a go-to 25, 30-point scorer every single night, right? I think the biggest question really comes on the defensive end. I think a lot of people have brought that up about just how him and Darius Garland are going to be able to handle, some of these bigger guard tandems across the NBA. But they also have arguably the best back line in the NBA behind them, right? With Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Kevin Love coming off the bench. They've got a really good overall team defense, but I think that Donovan Mitchell is going to elevate them to a different level on the offensive end of the floor. So I think that's really a big move. I'm going to show my homerism right now. Malcolm Brogdon to the Celtics is a huge move. I mean, anybody that watched that final series against the Warriors knows that they need an additional 17 to 20 point scorer per night. And Malcolm Brogdon is definitely that guy. Whether or not he stays healthy is the biggest question, right? We're already not expecting him to be ready for the start of the season. But if he can stay healthy, give them 60-ish games in the regular season and then healthy for the playoffs, I don't see why that won't make them a more competitive team down the stretch. Again, just a guy that can create, baskets, in isolation, develop for others. I think he'll just be an important piece for them, going forward. And then third, got to be DeJounte Murray for the Hawks, right? And I think that this is honestly more important for Trae Young's development in the sense that Trae will now be able to take more of a Steph Curry-esque role of being off the ball more. Trae is he's been in the league for about 3 years at this point, and he's handling the ball damn near every single possession, and rightfully so. But now that you have another all-star caliber guy who can, manage that offense, I think that Atlanta can do a lot with Trae Young, running off of screens, getting better open looks, but still being able to be a, elite pick-and-roll offensive player. And then DeJounte being, 6'5", really rangy guard who can defend basically 1 through 3 to a certain degree, I think will help them a lot as well. Whether or not that team really gets elevated, I think is still in question because I don't, frankly, really believe in the rest of that roster, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think that he'll definitely, elevate them from, playing game status to maybe slightly above for the next year. So those are my 3 biggest moves in the Eastern Conference this past summer.
Got you. So I don't know if I'm as high on the DeJounte Murray move as a lot of people, because I think there's a question of, can 2 ball-dominant point guards play together? I definitely see that Trae Young obviously has to be able to play a little bit more off the ball because he was pretty worn down last season. He had incredibly high usage, and he can't just run the show by himself. So obviously this is a move that makes them better. But for me, I actually, in that number 3 spot, I liked what Philly did. And it's not necessarily one move, but the combination of PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, Daniel House, and Montrezl Harrell. To me, I thought, for me, that was my number 3 spot because they really just beefed up their roster. Absolutely. And made it so that they kind of bolstered themselves. Like, you have more defense, you have more athleticism, you have some shooting. And I don't necessarily know how those guys will do, but I know one thing, it's going to make it easier for James Harden. It's going to make it easier for Joel Embiid to maybe rest a little bit during the regular season.
100%.
And so I think that actually, the combination of those 4 moves, to me, I like better than what Atlanta did because I still feel like Atlanta's got a little bit of a depth issue, right? Like we're talking about the rest of that roster. Like, I just not sure, like, defensively, like, are they going, like, last season they were, like, pretty, like, abysmal defensively. if you're changing just one guard, and DeJounte Murray, great defender, that they're going to get better defensively, but
you just don't know how much they get elevated as a whole.
Right, yeah. And so I also wonder, like, a guy like Trae Young, I just have always felt like a guy like him could be really targeted, and that's going to be less the case. But I feel like maybe we got to look at some of these other guys, like is DeAndre Hunter. He's advertised as a great defender, but can he be that lockdown defender for them? What is John Collins bringing to the table defensively? And can a guy like Clint Capella, and the way the game's being played now, is he going to be a reliable 5 in the playoffs defensively? Right.
Yeah, those are big questions, and I don't know. Personally, I just don't think that John Collins or Clint Capella is a solid number 3, right, for a real contending team. I don't think anyone looks at Atlanta as a real contender, but again, kind of to your point, just how elevated do they really get? DeJounte Murray, obviously talented, all-star level guy, but wouldn't be surprised if they finish out next season similar to where they were this past season, kind of in that play-in status.
Right, and then in terms of the other 2 moves, I mean, obviously Malcolm Brogdon and Donovan Mitchell were the top moves in the East. But for me, I actually got Malcolm Brogdon as the number 1 move because more so, I'm not saying that I think Malcolm Brogdon is better than Donovan Mitchell, but what I'm saying is I think he is literally the perfect player. I couldn't have even imagined a more perfect move going into this offseason. We were talking about people who, because we're Celtics fans, so we were talking about people who we wanted on the team. I don't even know if he came up, you know what I mean? But
no.
He's just perfect because he's a point guard, he can defend, he can shoot, and that was if you watch the finals or if you watch the Celtics at all last season, they just needed one more guy like that to plug into their top tier defense, and I really just think that fit for me makes it the best move. Obviously, I agree. I don't know about his health, and then in terms of Donovan Mitchell, I love the move. Right, but there were some people that were talking about something that I'd never even considered, but Colin Sexton versus Donovan Mitchell. Now, I'm not saying they're the same level player. Donovan Mitchell, I obviously got a tremendous amount of respect for him, but are you really upgrading that spot that much for what they gave up? And the question of whether those 2 guys can defend is a real one. Now, I agree that no other team I could look at and be I'm worried about them defensively when you've got a front line like Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. I think they can make up for it a little more, unlike a team like Atlanta.
Agreed.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Now, what were you thinking? What do you think's the most underrated move in the East?
Kind of addressing what you were talking about previously with the Sixers, I think the Sixers as a whole had a very underrated just offseason in terms of really rounding out their bench. I think just especially in this Golden State dynasty era, I think you just see the importance of having a legitimate 9 to 10 guys who you can really go to at any given point, right? Just so that you're never in lack of shooting or defense or whatever it is, but really just rounding out that offense or rounding out that roster past that 7th or 8th spot. But I think PJ Tucker was probably the one that flew under the radar the most in terms of moves. I mean, he's just that kind of perfect glue guy, right? He doesn't need to be a primary scorer, but he can be, he can guard your best offensive player. He's a great knockdown 3-point shooter. I think he just brings a different level of toughness and kind of culture to that team that I think is needed. So I think that was a really underrated move. And then kind of secondary, I think, is Joe Ingles to the Bucks. I think that was a really kind of under the radar move. One where people aren't really talking about him because he tore his ACL last year. He wasn't really involved in Utah towards the latter half of the season. I don't know what his health status is in terms of coming back in next year, but I think a similar scenario to Brogdon. If you can get 50 to 60 games out of him in the regular season plus a healthy playoff run, he fits just modern NBA so well, just being like that point forward guy, 6'8", really good passer, knockdown shooter. You can even throw him in the pick and roll every now and again. He probably won't be starting on that team, but he will be a very solid, sixth, seventh man for that team. So I have really high expectations for the Bucks this upcoming year, and I think that Joe Ingles plays really well into their overall development.
Yeah, Joe Ingles. So I think his health status is he's going to be able to join the team halfway through the year.
So
but it is still absolutely matters because he should be ready for them in playoff time. So I agree. That's a huge move that nobody is talking about, right?
No, not at all.
And I'm just imagining a lineup of Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Joe Ingles, Giannis, and Brook Lopez.
That's tough.
Yeah, I never really think of, I don't know why, but I never really think of the Bucks as a team that scares me offensively. I'm more scared of what they can do defensively because you got three guys like Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and even Brook Lopez is pretty underrated as a defender. Now to add another guy that can create out of ball screens, create his own shot, he can shoot. It gives you, if you're a team that's got somebody that's a weak spot defensively, you're going to have a hard time guarding that team.
Yeah.
But in terms of my underrated moves, I originally was going to say either the Royce O'Neal to the Brooklyn Nets / TJ Warren to the Brooklyn Nets because I like those moves. One, because the Nets get a more experienced lockdown defender. At some points in the year, last year, Bruce Brown and Kessler Edwards were kind of like their guys, but now you get a guy I think that's a stud defensively, and then you also get a guy that was just going absolutely bananas in the bubble, right? But that actually is not my top move anymore because just recently the Bogdanovich to Detroit move, I thought, which I feel totally lost in all of the NBA media buzz about Udoka because it happened around the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's, to me, the most underrated move right now because when I was writing my preview for the Eastern Conference, one of the things that I said about Detroit is that I still feel like they're pretty easy to if you take Cade Cunningham out the game, I feel like they're pretty easy to guard still. If you look up and down their roster, we don't know what we're getting out of Jaden Ivey. He could be good. He could, I think he's a good fit for them.
Gonna need some time to develop.
Yeah, Sadiq Bey is obviously going to be a player to have to worry about for other teams. But I was just saying, now that you got another offensive threat alongside Sadiq Bey, now I'm looking at them oh, okay, they're going to be able to play in space a little more than I thought. And for somebody with the playmaking skills that Cade Cunningham has, I think that's going to really unlock some things for him. And I kind of wanted to move them up from my original preview of the 16 teams and where I had them, but I still think they're on the outside looking in, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the play-in. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
They're going to be super competitive this year. They were relatively competitive last year, and Cade Cunningham had a very, I think, underrated rookie season last year. I have high expectations for Jaden Ivey. I know that he's definitely going to need some time to develop, but I think he will fit very well alongside Cade Cunningham. Really athletic, can definitely play both sides of the floor. His shot definitely needs a little bit of work from a development perspective, but no, I agree with you. I think the Bogdanovich one was kind of lost in the media shuffle of the past couple of days, but will definitely be an important move for them going forward.
For sure. Any other thoughts on off-season moves, or should we move on to talking about the rookies of the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, let's move on to the rookies.
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
Cool. So my top three, I'll go in reverse order here. So I have a tie for three. So I have Jaden Ivey and Mark Williams to the Hornets. I think that a lot of people sleep on Mark Williams. He's also a big dude, 7'2", 240, pretty solidly athletic. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Clint Capella. Probably doesn't jump as high, but definitely a very solid lob threat. And honestly, I kind of opened my eyes to him when so I was at the Final Four in New Orleans back in April, and I saw that Duke UNC game, and had watched Duke pretty consistently throughout the year, but he's really solid, and I think that he's got a nice opening in that Hornets roster. Right, they are log jammed at that power forward spot. They've got seems like they've got 7 guys that might be able to get minutes, but that center position is a little bit thin behind Mason Plumlee. So I think that he's going to get a lot more minutes than people would anticipate. I think he's a really good defender, a lot more rangy than I think people give him credit for. So I'm excited to see how he develops, and tends to be classic late lottery pick where you're not fully sure where he's going to land, but I personally have had pretty high expectations for him. We just talked about Jaden Ivey, and I also have Benedict Mathurin to the Pacers. I love that guy's game. I mean, he's watching him at Arizona last year, I think anytime you have big time Pac-12 players that kind of get lost in the media hype because they play on the West Coast, they play a little bit later. But that dude has, I think, everything that you need to be a very solid 2-guard in the NBA, right? Good shooter, super athletic, good playmaking skills, has the clutch gene, hit a lot of big shots for Arizona late in that season last year. And I think that he's in line to take that shooting guard spot because who knows where Buddy Hield ends up, but I don't foresee him being in Indiana through the end of this current season. So I think him and Tyrese Halliburton are going to have the opportunity to really develop together as a pretty solid backcourt. So I have high expectations for Benedict. And lastly, my top rookie, got to go with the number 1 pick, Paolo Banchero. Similarly, again, saw him live at the Final Four this past April. The guy's talented, man, and I think the Carmelo Anthony kind of comparison is really spot on in terms of just what he can do. And I think, frankly, during a lot of his college stint at Duke, he was honestly a little bit more passive than I think than he should have been, right? I think there were a lot of moments, especially in that Final Four game, and he still had a really good game. He was definitely over about 20 points, 10 rebounds, whatever it was. But a lot of moments where he was kind of deferring to other people to go get a bucket. The guy's just got a lot of talent. He can put it on the floor. He's 6'10", well-sized guy. Definitely, plays a very, classic, power forward position, but can stretch the floor. I have really high expectations for him. I think that he's going to thrive really well. I think Orlando as a whole has a lot of really solid pieces around him. I like Cole Anthony. I like Jalen Suggs. I like Franz Wagner. I think that he's going to have a nice little core around him, and they're giving him the keys, right? So he's going to be able to develop a lot this upcoming season. So I have high expectations for Paolo. What about you, though?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I got Paolo number 1 as well.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of the modern day 4, if you got somebody that can play make, score, shoot, I think you're really just dangerous at that position.
Yeah.
There were some concerns about him defensively and how he'll translate. I'm not sure that I'm completely buying into that because I think the NBA game is a lot different than the college game, and I just think that he'll be able to hold his own defensively. He's a pretty good athlete, and it might just take a little bit of time to get him there, but when you have the opportunity to draft a guy like that, like somebody that can create at 6'10",
yeah,
and shoot the ball and pass, I think that's one of the things that's most underrated about him. He can really pass. I think he averaged around 4 or 5 assists a game in college. That's going to be huge for them.
Absolutely.
Because looking at the Orlando Magic, that was the one thing they're missing. They actually got a lot of great pieces, right? But I just never really felt like they had that number 1 option offensively.
No.
And that's why when the draft came around, I was confused. People kept talking about Jabari Smith going first.
Yeah.
And I just didn't, more so not that I don't like Jabari Smith, but I didn't understand the fit for the Magic. They need somebody that can create. Jabari Smith, that's not really what he does. He can shoot, he can really defend, and he probably does both of those things better than Paolo. But you know how this league works is it's about the stars, and Paolo to me has got more of like a star type of potential. So I got him one, and honestly I got a pretty similar list to you, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. But just to touch on Jaden Ivey a little more, yeah, I probably got Benedict Mathurin too, and because I think he's going to have opportunity, right?
Exactly.
And so and he's also just an electric player. You know, I'm gonna leave it at that. You covered him pretty well, but I'm gonna talk about Jaden Ivey a little bit because I definitely have said this to you before. I was not high on him. I wasn't high on him coming out of the draft. But when he got drafted to Detroit, because that was kind of unexpected, because nobody thought that the Kings were going to take Keegan Murray forward. Then I was like, oh, so he's going somewhere where he doesn't have to be the point guard? Because that's what all these projections have been projecting him as. And, you know, I hate the comparison. I don't really think he's like John Morant. I mean, aside, you know, there's things aesthetically about their game, like the athleticism and like watching them in transition, and, you know, maybe got similar bag qualities. You know, it's funny. I don't know if not a lot of people know this, but Jaden Ivey's mom coached John Morant in the league. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, she was an assistant for the Grizzlies, and you know now
she's at Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, yeah. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there may be like that could be some reasons why they have some similarities in their game, but I just didn't see the playmaking that Ja has. I think Ja's playmaking is what really makes him special, and like
probably doesn't get enough credit for it. Honestly.
No, he doesn't, and that was what really caught my eye about him coming out of Murray State. And like Jaden Ivey does a lot of things well. Like he's an absolute bull in transition. You know, he can score, and when I saw him, I never really felt like he's the type of dude that, like, you give him the ball and just go in the NBA. But landing in Detroit, I actually thought was a great fit, because now he's got a chance to, I mean, almost have like a maybe Marcus Smart like type of trajectory. Not saying that he's exactly like Marcus Smart, because there's some things that he does better. You know, but I think that there's not so much pressure on him to create and be the guy.
Yeah.
I think it's a great fit then, because then now, and I'm not sure if he's going to be the starter. I'd said before earlier in the podcast, it really probably is going to be Alec Burks to start, which is also kind of an underrated move, by the way.
Dead-eye shooter.
Yeah. So I think he, for me, just because of the fit, I love that he landed there, because he's going to get a chance to kind of grow at his own rate. Yeah. And I think that's important for him. What about, like, was there anybody in the second round in the Eastern Conference that got drafted that you think might surprise some people?
Yeah, I thought the best second-round move was actually another guy of Arizona, Christian Koloko, going to the Raptors. The Raptors clearly know what their identity is. It's grabbing just massive, tall dudes to just be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. I think kind of similar to the Hornet situation. I think that they have a lot of really solid guys at that 4 spot, kind of in that like 6'9" to like 6'11" range, but like they're not really solid for like 7-footers. So, you know, I think him, you know, Precious Achiuwa, I think that they'll be, you know, a nice kind of, you know, center spot tandem. And yeah, I think watching Christian last year, you know, he's, again, really athletic, can, you know, not necessarily, you know, switch off on any type of guard, you know, out on the perimeter, but I think gets a little bit, you know, not necessarily disrespected, but it doesn't get enough credit for, you know, how good of an athlete he is. You know, finishes well under the rim, you know, really good lob threat opportunity for him as well. So I think it'll be, you know, kind of a slow drip for him in terms of getting minutes on that roster, because they are deep right now. But I think come All-Star break, late in the season, I think you'll start seeing a lot more of Christian Koloko over the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I like that pick too, because they're building off that identity, and you're going to hear me talk about identity a lot on this podcast, and I really love what the Raptors are doing, and because it's different, right? Like, I hate teams that just do, they're just like putting together a team and they don't really like have any goal of what they're trying to accomplish. Like they know Toronto is not maybe the top free agent destination, so we got to do something different. And I respect the hell out of that. Yeah. My pick is definitely a homer pick, but I'm going to explain it because I like J.D. Davison a lot after watching him in Summer League. So I think there are a lot of guys that when you watch them in college, they don't look good, which he didn't. He turned the ball over a lot. He didn't shoot it great. If you just went off his college tape, you'd probably be like, I don't know about that pick.
Yeah.
But I love J.D. Davison because I think he's one of those guys that his game translates better to the NBA. Mm. He's got that athleticism. He really impressed me with his floor general abilities in Summer League. And not that I hate like drawing a lot of conclusions from Summer League, but he was really good. and I just think in my experience working at Missouri with a guy like Jordan Clarkson, right? He was not really like in the mock drafts like that. Like he was definitely projected to get drafted and, he didn't end up going first round.
Yeah.
And I was telling you the whole time, I'm like, this dude is a pro, bucket. Right? Because he's got an NBA game. He's a bucket. He's got the athleticism. He's got the size. And I'm not saying they're similar players because I don't think they are. But I think J.D. Davison's the type of guy that you may not see his game in college because it's a different game, right? Like the paint's packed more. You're playing in much more structure. And I think that
not as fast-paced.
Not as fast-paced. Like I don't know that he's probably not going to make an impact this season unless, these guys are not healthy like we are worried that they're not going to be.
Yeah.
But I see down the line like him being a guy that's on an NBA roster and we're looking at ourselves like, why did he go 58 when it was painfully obvious that, like if you watched him in high school, like you could see pro.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Elite athlete, one. And then, but I think, probably the biggest, so like you said, he didn't have a great year at Alabama and he's a unproven shooter at this point, right? And I think that's probably the biggest hiccup for him. Like you said, when he was in high school, 2 years ago, he was a lock to be a lottery pick. But I think that just he showed himself in terms of his offensive deficiencies. But I think, if he's thrown into the fire in the right scenario, comes in as a defender, energy guy, not required to shoot. I think that he'll definitely be, pretty solid for the Celtics. But to your point, wouldn't be terribly surprised if he doesn't make really any kind of impact this upcoming year. But I think over the course of time, that athleticism and defensive capability and potential will definitely show out. And if he can develop any semblance of a shot, don't see why he, can't make himself a little name in the league.
Right. So why don't we jump into ranking our Eastern Conference teams, and then first party foul of the podcast. Why don't we jump into ranking our Eastern Conference teams? We did this kind of in a vacuum. I don't know what Colin's are. He doesn't know what mine are. Yep. So I'm interested to see like what he ranked and what. Where our differences are and how it will end up manifesting itself at the end of the season. Yeah. So why don't you list out your top 15?
Cool. Should we go reverse chronological?
Yeah, let's go reverse.
Cool.
Reverse.
This guy.
I don't know why I said that.
Like a middle school dance song out there. So at 15, I got Indiana. They're clearly going into full rebuild mode, even though they have some pretty solid pieces right now. But I just don't foresee Miles Turner or Buddy Hield being on that team through the All-Star break. And I think that's probably the biggest question mark for them in terms of whether they're even slightly competitive. Even with them, I don't think that those two make them a real contender or anything along those lines. But I've got them at 15.
But here's my question about that. Like, why are those guys on the trading block?
I feel like the two of them have been on the trading block for two years at this point.
Yeah, they have been. But, I just don't get, like they're good players, right? Yeah. I guess maybe if you're looking at them, we're trying to tank like Utah, but I don't feel like they've really been making those types of moves. So
and they might not necessarily need to. I mean, because you got Tyrese Halliburton, who's clearly next up.
Right.
I mean, who knows if he's really that guy? But I mean, he's going to be a very solid player for a really long time. So a combo of him, Hield, Miles Turner, Ben Mathurin. They've got some solid pieces. Chris Duarte had a really solid season last year.
Which is why I don't think they've done what Utah did or the Thunder did.
Yeah,
because
not to that
they've
level.
Actually got decent pieces. So you have those decent pieces and could still very well get the first pick, right?
Yeah.
So why would you trade? And that's why I don't think they've been traded, right? They could have easily made a move to trade those guys to the Lakers.
Yeah.
But they didn't because I think they've got a little bit of a solid foundation. So that's just my 2 cents on Indiana.
No, I think you're right, and I think honestly my projection of them is more with the assumption that those guys will get moved more than anything else. I think that if they do stay through the end of the season, I think that they're frankly better than Orlando, and they're probably better than Detroit. But for right now, just like with my expectation that they'll be gone before the end of the season, I think that's where they will end up finishing. 14, I've got Orlando. A lot of really good pieces, but just very young. Not a lot of veteran presence on that roster. 13, I got Detroit for all the reasons that we've talked about. Have really high expectations for Cade Cunningham. Jaden Ivey comes into a pretty solid role. Adding in Bogdanovich the other day, I think will be really helpful for that offense as a whole. Again, having another kind of veteran presence to help those young guys develop. I like Isaiah Stewart a lot as well. At 12, I got Washington. And 12, Washington is painful because I really like Brad Beal, but he's, in my opinion, kind of signed his death wish of re-signing with Washington. It gives me very similar vibes to Melo re-signing with the Knicks. Kind of just that expectation, like I'm here to go get. He got his $240 million, whatever it was, but
it was in the two.
It was in the 2 range, so it doesn't even matter at that point. But he knows he's not going to win there. I mean, they're just not. They're just not going to get the level of free agents necessary to make them really competitive. I think they got a couple solid pieces around them. Kuzma. They added Monte Morris at the point guard spot this past offseason. Another kind of underrated move. I like Monte Morris a lot. But again, I just don't think that roster is elite by any means where they're even going to be competing for, they can maybe sneak in at that 10 spot for the play-in game, but I don't really have super high expectations for them.
Just to touch on Bradley Beal a little bit, with that being said, he did sign that big contract with the Wizards, and I do think that he's trying to stay there long term.
Yeah.
Right. But nowadays, you can sign that contract and demand a trade a few years later.
100%,
so
100%.
I don't know that because I look at him as he's a real competitor. I'm not saying Melo's not, but I could see that maybe being in the back of his head because that's just how the modern NBA is. Right.
You're not wrong. Yeah, that's a good point. Rounding it out, I got Charlotte at 11. So in this case, missing the play-in game. I just, kind of to your point about just the term identity. I just feel like they don't have an identity. I just don't know how that roster, the roster is just constructed oddly to me. I feel like they have a lot of guys at that small forward, power forward position that have potential, but aren't getting enough minutes to really develop. They're a little bit thin at that guard spot behind LaMelo and Terry Rozier. So I don't really have super high expectations for them, but they'll continue to be an exciting, competitive team. Miles Bridges definitely took a pretty big step this past year. But I just don't foresee them making a jump into the playoff contention level. They are, in my preseason rankings, falling right outside of that play-in game, but I think it's kind of a toss-up between them and the Knicks, frankly. So I have the Knicks listed at 10. I think that they'll be, definitely better with the addition of Jalen Brunson. A little, trio of Brunson, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle. I think is a pretty solid trio. I don't think that they're a real deep playoff contender by any means, but because I think frankly just the rest of the roster is not that special. But I think that they'll be in contention for a play-in game spot. Don't foresee them going super far though. And then this is where it gets really tough. I think at like that 9 spot, because the top half of the Eastern Conference is just like really deep this year. So I've got Atlanta at 9, for kind of all the same reasons that we touched on with the I won't speak on it for too long, but again, DeJounte Murray obviously is a big addition for them going forward, but I just don't see the rest of that roster really elevating them to anything further than what they were last year, which is again just a play-in team. At 8, I have Chicago, and I feel not necessarily bad about this, but like...
Wait, I have like a super random note about Atlanta. I don't know why I thought of this just now, but the DeJounte Murray, Trae Young move, it's not the same move here, but it reminded me of, like, for some reason, the Tyreek Evans, Kevin Martin backcourt. Like, on paper, you like...
that is a random throwback.
Right? On paper, like, it seems like it could really work, but that one did not, right? And I was, because, like, you got your guy that can shoot, and then you got your guy that can create and defend, and, like, they kind of make up for each other's weaknesses, but that one, for whatever reason, maybe it's because of the Kings, but that move reminds me of, I still think it's going to make them better. I'm not saying it's like the same level of move, but that just came to me out of nowhere.
Random thought.
Yeah.
But I can see that. So yeah, at the 8 spot, I got Chicago. And again, like I said, the top of the Eastern Conference is just really dense. So I feel like I think that they have better talent than what you would generally assume someone finishing at the 8 spot would be. But I think a lot of it is going to be relative to Lonzo Ball, who looks at this point like he's not going to be playing for the beginning of the season. And we saw what happened with that team last year when he went out. In my opinion, I think Lonzo Ball is one of the more underrated point guards in the NBA, right? I mean, he really developed his shot over the past couple of years. He was shooting at like 42% from 3 last year. He really, really has come a long way from that perspective. But I just don't foresee some combination of Caruso and Kobe White fulfilling exactly what's going to be needed in that in that point guard spot. Both of them are very good pieces, but I just don't think that they totally make up for what is lost by having Lonzo Ball at that point guard spot. At 7, I've got Cleveland. Again, going to be very competitive with that addition of Donovan Mitchell, one of the better defenses in the NBA. Darius Garland took a really big step this past year. Is definitely turning into one of the better kind of scoring point guards in the NBA. So I have high expectations for them. But again, probably if they were in the Western Conference, would probably be ranked a little bit higher. But I think the East is just really, really tough at the top level. So at 6, I've got Toronto. Again, really great defense, right? You already touched on it. They have a great identity on the defensive side of the ball. Big fan of Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes definitely came into his own towards the latter half of last year. So I think that they'll definitely be very competitive, and especially on the defensive end of the floor, I think that'll elevate them quite a bit. And then it pains me to put the Celtics at 5, even after going to the finals last year. I just think that there's...
Now I got a question for you about that. Does the recent news, did that bump them down?
No, honestly.
And I'm not just talking about Udoka, I'm also talking about Robert Williams.
No. Even with Robert Williams healthy, I would still probably have put them at that 5 spot. They made some solid moves this offseason with Brogdon and Gallo. Gallo's already out for the year with that ACL injury. But I have questions about their front court depth behind Robert Williams and Al Horford. as well as just general health. I think that, whether or not Brogdon can get through a full season is really going to be it's going to be massive for them. Because, at this point, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they can't carry that load by themselves on the offensive side of the ball. So, they have all the talent in the world. You've got a arguably top, whatever your personal kind of opinion is, top 5 to 10 guy in Jason Tatum, probably a top 20, 25 guy in Jaylen Brown. Really good, defensive player of the year in Marcus Smart. So they've got good, solid pieces, but the way that the season ended last year, even with getting to the finals, it just left a bad taste in my mouth with, they played with their food with Milwaukee, right? That shouldn't have been a 7-game series. Miami should not have been a 7-game series. Both of those probably should have been done in 5 or 6. So I think that there's just a lot of questions in terms of just their consistency and having enough scoring when necessary, knowing how to close out games. So right now I have them at the 5 spot.
That's a lot lower than I was expecting you to have them, and definitely a lot lower than consensus, although I don't know if this recent news has maybe bumped down people's projections, but I feel like we're big Celtics fans, but we're also like big Celtics critics.
Of course.
And so I feel like we're both like lower on them than, a lot of previews got them 1, you know what I mean? So it's funny because like I was worried about us being like Celtics biased, but we're probably a little too critical on it because we have like trust issues with them. I don't know, because
they
like
just rip your heart out. Every
this
game.
team, when you're a fan of this team, I'm not hating on them. I love them like with all my heart. But over the years, they've just fucked with us. Like honestly, like they do stuff that like makes you like one day you're like, oh my god, we got the best team in the league, and then the next day you're like,
what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. So we love them. We're just doing this to temper our own expectations.
Yeah, and we're also just realists. You know what I mean? Like we're not every fan. I think it's safe to say that every fan base has a segment that is just out of touch and just like not based in reality. Boston fans probably more than others though. So like there's lots of people that we, grew up with and went to high school with who just like have very inflated ideas about like what the Celtics are. And, at the end of the day, like if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals this upcoming year, I wouldn't be terribly surprised, but I also wouldn't be surprised by a second round exit because, frankly, I think everybody's opinion would be a lot different of them if they didn't close out Milwaukee in that second round series, right? But again, they should have ended that series in 5. We were actually at game, I think it was game 3 up in Milwaukee. And that was the one where Al Horford, like, he tipped it in, but like with the clock had like literally just run out, whatever it was.
Prime example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they had controlled the first 2 games of that series, and then they go down by like 20 and have to make this ridiculous comeback in that game 3, and should have stolen the game. But either way, they're just
we were walking out super salty.
Oh my god, it was brutal. But the great part of that was that that fourth quarter was ridiculous because one, if you guys have never been to Milwaukee and Fiserv Forum, like unbelievable stadium, like one of the best basketball stadiums that I've ever been to. They have a awesome fan base as an outside viewer. They were rocking in that place on that Saturday, and we were getting real quiet in that third quarter, but then just like how the crowd shifted in that fourth quarter was just hilarious. It was just so quiet, and we were literally in the last seats in this stadium, like right on the back row, and we are screaming our heads off like the entire fourth quarter, just going nuts, and just made that ridiculous comeback, and unfortunately it didn't pan out the way that it needed to, but quintessential to your exact point of just like they can just rip your heart out on a night to night basis. They are an exhausting team to be a fan of sometimes. And then I'll move through this a little bit quicker with the last 4. So I've got Miami at 4, really deep roster. They have talking about identity, they probably have the best identity in the NBA. They know what they're about. They play hard. They're really well coached. And they'll always kind of be in that top 5, honestly, for the foreseeable future, in my opinion. And then my top three, I'm going to round it out with the Nets, Sixers, and Bucks. I don't think that you could argue that there's a better trio in the NBA than a healthy Ben Simmons, KD, and Kyrie Irving.
Right.
So it would not.
You coming off that JJ Redick Ben Simmons podcast, feeling good, feeling good.
I texted this dude yesterday, and I was like, Ben Simmons, he doesn't really seem as much of an asshole as they normally, then the media kind of paints him out to be. And then he's like, that's kind of the point of why he was on the podcast, because they're trying to make his PR a little bit better, right? And just how the public receives him, because I can't think of another podcast or long interview that he's ever done. Like, I've never sat there and listened to him talk about, it feels like anything, honestly, throughout the duration of his professional career at this point. So, but it was a good interview, and he seems like a pretty decent guy. It seems like he's in a much better mental place. Even prior to that, I definitely think that the way that Philadelphia handled him last year and the year prior was not right. Doc and Joel Embiid definitely threw him under the bus after the end of that Atlanta series. And I'm not going to say rightfully so. He did not play up to his expectations, and he admitted that on that podcast. But overall, I think that this is now a great situation for him. He does not have to be that primary scorer. You're playing with probably 2 of the top 5 individual scorers in the NBA. So him in conjunction with KD and Kyrie, I don't even need to touch on them. They're great. I think that they're going to be really competitive. I think the biggest question for that team as a whole is going to be on the defensive end. They have enough offensive firepower to play with anybody. But at this point, I still have the Sixers being slightly better. We talked about this previously. They've got just one of the deeper rosters in the NBA overall, top to bottom. So I have pretty high expectations for them. I think Tyrese Maxey is definitely just elevating his game every single year. So I think that they'll be in that Eastern Conference Finals conversation. And then number 1, I got the Bucks, and I think that they're going to be the team that's going to be representing the East in the finals. In my opinion, Giannis is number 1 in the league. Currently, I just think he's at that Shaq, just unstoppable physical force level. And I think that they probably would have made a deeper run last year if Chris Middleton was healthy. Chris Middleton doesn't get enough credit for just overall just how talented he is, one. And I think that he'll just be really, important, along with adding Joe Ingles. They re-signed Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, always very solid.
Yo, I don't know why this whole summer I thought Bobby Portis went to the Warriors.
I think they offered him a contract.
Did they?
I think they might have.
But bro, bullshit. Until a few weeks ago, I was like, yo, they kept Bobby Portis.
Yeah.
I was in the whole mindset that, damn, the Warriors made some plays this summer. I was thinking he was on the Warriors, but yeah, he's on the Bucks.
He's back on the Bucks. And yeah, that's just they're just a good team. They're defensive minded. They've got good shooting. Yeah, so I think that they're coming out of the Eastern Conference this year.
No, it's good to see. I'm really happy that we did this separately, because we actually have a lot of differences. I was worried that we were going to be too similar, because I'm not just trying to come on this podcast and agree with your ass. I'm trying to have some heated debates and
I agree.
Go at each other's necks and compete over predictions for the season.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
We will be referencing this in a couple months.
We're just getting warmed up over here, so our time will come. Anyway, so I've got I agree with you about the Pacers. I got last, but I'm gonna run through my entire order and then kind of touch on maybe some of the differences that I heard that you were talking about. So I've got Pacers, Hornets, who I've got real low, which I'll touch on in a second. I've got Pistons 13, Knicks 12, Wizards 11, Magic 10, Hawks 9, Bulls 8, which I think we both had.
Yep.
Raptors 7. I've got Nets 6, which I that's the one that I'm like, damn, I'm going to be kicking myself for that one. But I still got them there.
Okay.
Cavs 5, Celtics 4, Heat 3, Bucks 2, 76ers 1.
Where did you have Toronto?
I had Toronto 7.
Okay. Sorry, I'm asking you can you rerun the last one? Your top 5. Rerun
my top 5 is Sixers, Bucks, Heat, Celtics, Cavs.
Okay.
So I think one of our biggest differences, and I'll go from the bottom up. The Hornets, I'm down on a lot because I just think that losing Miles Bridges was a huge loss. Like, I don't trust Gordon Hayward's health, and so like think about that team last year without Miles Bridges. I just don't think that they've got it. Like that, they didn't make.
Wait, hold up. They don't have Miles Bridges.
No, he's like going to court. Bro.
I know about that situation, but I didn't. But like, did the Hornets come out and say that he's like suspended for the year?
No, I mean like there's still no determination on that. Like he's still on their cap sheet, but bro, he's not about to play this year. You think he's going to play this year?
I'm not disputing whether he. Whether he should be in trouble or not.
Right. But you're right, though. There hasn't been he's suspended for the year.
That's my point. That's my point. So it's just like until I'm not even trying to cut your time, but basically like I'm not counting his talent out of my prediction until I get like a solid yes, he's done for the year.
That's fair.
Type of
so I counted him out, and
that's fair.
Without
that's fair
him, I'm like,
no. Without him, they're rough.
I will say they've got a few guys like on the end of that bench that can like step in and maybe do some things. Like I love James Bouknight. The kid Kai Jones, I think, got
Kai Jones, man.
Talent. Yeah,
he's got something.
So, but I'm down on them. I didn't, when you've got an assistant coach that's got an opportunity to take the head coaching job and then he just dips and that Kenny Atkinson did.
Yep.
It just tells me there's some red flags there. So that's kind of why I based that. I had the Pistons 13, Knicks outside. That's one of those ones I feel like I maybe am being a little too harsh on the Knicks, but the stat that stands out to me about them and why I don't have them in the play-in is that they've only got 3 players on that roster with over 4 years of experience. You know what I mean? So like they're really young and they just don't have the vets, and like you need the vets in this league to win. I love the Jalen Brunson move. I don't think that he got overpaid. Weren't we at a Bulls Mavs game this year together?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was talking about Jalen Brunson the whole game, and I'm like, yo, this dude's nice.
Oh, he's got a bag.
And I think he'll do well for them.
100%.
But so I was a little more down on them than because you had them in the play, right?
I had them at like 10.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
And then Wizards 11, which I think we had pretty similar. And then I had Magic 10 because they
got pieces.
I like the construction of this roster, and
pieces.
like low key, they got some depth too. Like,
they do.
I'm not exactly sure what the starting lineup is. I saw a projection that it could be Fultz, Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner, Paolo, and Wendell Carter.
Yeah.
But like, we forgot about Jonathan Isaac, right? We've already forgotten about Jalen Suggs, who was literally just drafted last year.
Nobody talks about him.
People were talking about him like, this is the next D Rose.
Nobody talks about Jalen Suggs.
I mean, I wasn't like super high on him going into college, and then he actually like performed better than I thought he was in college, and then now after last year, I mean,
maybe a little Gonzaga inflation, but
yeah.
But
could be that.
But he's solid. He's a solid piece.
And then, they re-signed Mo Bamba, which I was like, that was an underrated move because I feel like he's got potential to be a starting 5 in this league.
Yeah,
right?
He's just got to get himself over that, like, 60 games in the season hump. You know what I mean? He's just spent a lot of his time in the NBA hurt.
Right. And then they also got Gary Harris. Like, they've got pieces. And
did he get hurt?
Is he hurt? Is he not going to play this year?
I think he just got hurt recently.
Oh, did he?
I could be wrong. Let me look back
up.
But keep going.
Yeah, depending on that. Either way, I still feel like they're in the plan. One, because I love Markel Fultz, and I just think if they're healthy, they've got a chance. And then some of our other differences, yeah. And then in the top, I've got. Where did you have the Raptors?
I had the Raptors at 6.
6, yeah. I mean, I had them 7, so
Yep.
pretty similar. Hawks, Bulls, Raptors, that's kind of like another tier. And teams that we all kind of like and think they have a chance to maybe be up in that top tier if everything goes right. But, we're just, that's more dependent on if some of the top 6 teams fall off, I think, more so than what they have. And then I guess the biggest difference is like the Nets, and I have them 6 because, it's just hard to trust the organization. It's not so much the pieces for me. I understand what it's like to work for an organization that is, got a lot of moving parts and a lot of drama, and I just think like that's not good. However, if there's one team that I feel like I'm going to kick myself for at the end of the year, it's that team.
Well, because the potential's through the roof.
Yeah,
but to your point, it's been a tumultuous couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyrie played half the season last year, and KD has had his injury issues. Ben Simmons hasn't played in about 18 months. So,
And I think the thing that, maybe I'm not accounting for is I think that they've got a move that they're going to make during the season, because do you really need Joe Harris, Seth Curry, and Patty Mills? Right? So, like, if they make, like, even a little move to kind of beef up that front court a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that they have a chance to do some things.
Yeah. But to your point, Nick Claxton can't do that by himself.
Yeah.
In that front court.
We'll see, yeah, though.
He's good. He's good, but I think they need someone else.
He's still young. I think he's got a chance. He could be that guy, but he hasn't been that guy. So
I'm not even disputing him. I'm just saying more so just in terms of overall front court depth.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm a little higher on the Cavs than you because not so much because of the Mitchell move, but I think that they've really got some depth.
Absolutely.
Karis LeVert as your 6th man. That's a potential 6th man of the year candidate type of player. They still got K Love, who
he was solid last year.
Yeah, who was solid, good last year. And then they got Rubio back, who was great for them last year.
Yeah, he was.
And a very underrated move was, I thought, Robin Lopez. Like, people forgot about Robin Lopez because he just didn't play in Orlando last year because, I don't know, he was either hurt or they were just tanking or what. But Robin Lopez is still a good player.
Yeah,
and
solid depth.
I don't think I've heard anybody talk about that move. And then, I got Celtics 4. My thinking behind the Celtics was that I just worry about their depth because Gallo being out, we're going to have to play a lot of those guys a lot of minutes. And I think they saw what happened last year when you do that during the regular season. So they may have to load manage the Jays a little more. And I just think, obviously, with Robert Williams being out 8 to 12 weeks, and, is Al Horford going to still be showering in the fountain of youth every day? At some point, this dude's got to show some sort of,
he's old, man.
Falling off, but so I just have questions more so than my lack of belief. I loved how they looked last year. I loved the defense, especially. Still believe in them, but I've got them 4. And then the Heat 3, I'm probably higher on because
I had them at 4.
It's about neck and neck, but the organization, I believe, and they're the same team as last year. They won the East, they re-signed Oladipo. They re-signed Caleb Martin. That's the other thing is people maybe are a little down on them because they didn't re-sign PJ Tucker. How Caleb Martin? That's not about to step into that role, right?
They've got people.
They always do that, and every year, So I'm high on the Heat, and then I've got Sixers 1. Kind of just to piggyback off of what I was talking about, they've got depth, man, and I think when you got that, and then I also just think people are just throwing James Harden in the trash, and I don't think he's there yet. He's still a good player, and you gotta. I would have fits guarding that backcourt.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I love that backcourt. And then I just think Joel Embiid's going to be trying to get vengeance for not getting MVP last year, right?
He's going to be on a mission this year.
So,
and I think to your point about James Harden, like, I think people just have this expectation that he was always supposed to maintain that, like, 2016, 2017 level of play. And it's like he clearly has lost a step with age, which just comes with the territory. He's not as athletic. He's not getting to the rim as consistently. But he's always been an elite passer, an elite playmaker. And he's, like, just moving into a more consistent traditional point guard role. He's still a good spot-up shooter. And he's always willing to get everyone else involved. And, now that you have a more deep overall roster, Tyrese Maxey is taking that next step. Joel Embiid, probably, in my opinion, 1A and 1B with him and Jokic in terms of top centers in the league. Like,
right.
He's not, you don't need him to go put up 27 to 30 a night. You only need 17 to 20 points. He's going to get you 10 assists and manage that game. So
right.
I think that he's still, maybe not as valuable as he was a couple of years ago, but I don't think you can argue that he's not still one of the best, playmaking guards in the league.
Right, and then the only thing that gave me hesitation about putting them one over Milwaukee, because, like, I feel like that's kind of a little bit of a bold move, because Milwaukee's just a powerhouse in the league right now. Are they going to be able to make enough threes? And are they going to be solid enough defensively? Because PJ Tucker, he very well could fall off. We don't know, how he's going to age. And I just think James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, probably kind of like the Cavs we're talking about, not the best defensive backcourt. Mm-hmm. And when you have that in this league right now, sometimes that can be tough. But we'll see. Is there anything else that you think we should touch on in the Eastern Conference before we go?
Let's do kind of our preseason award picks. So let's do MVP, Rookie of the Year, and Most Improved. So why don't you go for it?
Yep. So MVP, I've got Joel Embiid. Mm-hmm. Like I just said, I think he's going to go on a tear this year. He's going to be healthier. He was messed up at the end of last year. I think they probably would have gone further if he hadn't had such bad injury luck. And then in terms of Rookie of the Year, we touched on it, Paolo Banchero in the East. I think he's Rookie of the Year overall.
Yep.
I probably would have said that either way. And then Most Improved Player Predictions. Man, that's a good one. You know what? I think I'm going to need you to come back to me on that one because I actually did not write that one down. Amateur hour.
That one was actually tough. I literally actually went and looked at so I guess I'll just jump in. I'll go in reverse chronological order to what you just did. But for Most Improved, I actually went and looked at the Vegas odds for him. And, like, the top two are Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton. And I think it's going to be Tyrese Halliburton because his opportunity is just going to be through the roof, right? He's getting the keys to that franchise. Anthony Edwards is, like, in the same kind of face of the franchise type of category, but he's just dealing with more stars around him, right? You've got Cat, Cat on that roster. D'Angelo Russell isn't a guy who's taking, a million shots, but I just think that, Anthony Edwards is, I'm not going to say he's in a better overall team position, but a worse position in terms of growing on a year-over-year basis just because he's surrounded by a lot of other really good players. So I think Tyrese Halliburton is going to have an opportunity to, really elevate his game, get himself into that, 22 to 25 points per game type of, scoring per night type of range. So I think that Tyrese comes in at my Most Improved. Rookie of the Year, I'm agreeing with you with Paolo for, all the reasons that we've touched on previously. And for MVP, I'm going with Luka.
Wait, were you saying for, like, the league overall?
What do you mean?
Oh, because I was just choosing this for the Eastern Conference.
Wait.
which is some dumbass shit because there is no Eastern Conference MVP.
That's so like as you asked me that question, I'm like, but wait, there's only one MVP. but like
as we said earlier, we're still trying to figure out the podcast.
First time.
Either way,
yeah. But yeah. So I've got Luka in the MVP this year. I think, unfortunately, kind of alluding to Joel not getting it last year, right? So much of the MVP discussion is about narrative, and like Luka has NBA media by the balls, So
Facts.
you know what I mean. So
Facts.
if and Luka's amazing. Like he's, in my opinion, probably a top 7 player in the NBA right now. He looked amazing at Eurobasket this past summer. Clearly has dropped a couple LBs, looks in better shape.
And he's just got the team for a guy that's going to win MVP. That's the unfortunate. I hate the MVP talk over the season. It's what makes the NBA so popular, but I hate it with all my heart because it's just a stupid conversation because it shouldn't your team that you play on shouldn't have anything to do with it, but it has to because your situation. If you're Luka and you're carrying Dallas to even the 6th seed, right? You just have an advantage over somebody like Joel Embiid, who he probably once James Harden joined the team lost the case, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that hits the nail on the head. So yeah, I got Luka as my MVP.
Most improved player for me, I guess I was literally just a second ago thinking of it in terms of the Eastern Conference most improved player, but I'm going to pick him anyways.
Yeah.
I got Rui Hachimura because I think he's a forgotten man.
He definitely is.
People were talking about him like he's the next Siakam, Giannis type of player in that mold. And I think he was hurt last year, so he didn't get to play a lot.
Yeah.
It's another situation where he's going to get a lot of offensive attention taken off him with them getting Porzingis now. Bradley Beal and Kyle Kuzma, who had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah, did.
So I think he's got a shot to really be that guy. And if he is that guy, then, Washington might actually be all right?
Couple pieces.
I feel like you may have forgotten about him. That
was the last person I was going to say.
Dead ass. I had forgotten about him too until I just looked at him in my notes and I was like, yo, wait, when's the last time somebody talked about him? Right?
2 years since he got drafted.
So
he's solid, man.
That's my pick. I didn't really look at the Western Conference guys, but fuck it. I'm gonna say Rui Hachimura for most improved player.
Nice. Well, I think that's about it, man. First episode in the books.
Hey, if you have made it this far, I just want to say I love you. But I also want to say, please, would love any feedback that you've got. Obviously, we know we're rusty. We haven't done this in 12 years, right? So, I'm honestly impressed with what we've done. The fact, how fast we set up this podcast and we're able to record. Now, I'm saying this knocking on wood, hoping nothing went terribly wrong that I don't realize. But we want your feedback because that's only going to make us better, and we're serving you because we want this podcast to be something that's in your regular rotation. And please just let us know, whether it's in the comments, whether it's on social media. By the way, if you want to follow us on social media, we're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube at Pullin Up from 40, one word, 40 spelled out instead of the numbers.
We'll throw throw all the links in the descriptions. So.
Right.
But yeah, to Lucas's point, really appreciate for all of you guys who are who have tuned in this far. Any feedback is greatly appreciated, and we'll see you guys for the next one.